Welcome to the Cyber Business Podcast, where we feature top founders and entrepreneurs and share their inspiring stories. Now, let's get started with the show.
Matthew Connor here, host of the Cyber Business Podcast. Today, Laurel Cipriani, CIO of AffirmedRX, returns to the show. Laurel, welcome back.
Thank you. I am so excited to be back today. Couldn't wait.
We're so excited to have you back. I've been looking forward to this. There's so many things we didn't get to talk about, but before we get into all of those, a quick word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by cyberlynx.com. That's cyberlynx.com. Hackers are getting smarter. Is your security keeping up? Cyberlynx sells industry-leading AI-powered cybersecurity solutions that detect threats in real time. So do you know about an attack before the damage is done, not after? Learn more at cyberlynx.com. That's cyberlynx.com. And now back to our show. Laurel, like I said, there's so much we didn't get to talk about. And one of my favorite topics is women in IT. And I think really it's like women in leadership, realistically. It's not just women in IT, though the two are very similar. I think they all kind of trace their roots to the same thing. And so let's start there.
Great.
It just super easy. I'm sure we'll be able to solve this problem really fast. So I'm looking forward to that. You know, it just, that's all it's going to take is just you and I putting our heads together and we will solve this problem. But,
Yeah.
but let's dive in. I mean, it's one of my favorite topics, and you have actually had a really cool and interesting career path. And I'm going to start by asking you, can you kind of introduce and give us your origin story, if you will, as our
Yes.
superhero guest, kind of how you came to be where you are today.
Yes, I would love that. I do think, not to brag, but I do think I have an interesting story as far as CIOs go. I think it's somewhat unusual. I started out studying psychology as an undergrad. I wanted to be a therapist. I specifically wanted to be a grief therapist. I wanted to help people that were mourning, and found that my heart is a bit too sensitive for that role. I was going home every night bawling and so upset. I got really attached to everyone I met with. So I pivoted to nursing and became a floor nurse very, very, very briefly, and got my master's degree in nursing. The very, very, very briefly is because it also turns out not a great fit for floor nursing because I'm very squeamish, and I literally fainted in an OR. I threw up when someone else threw up. I was a terrible, terrible fit, although I loved the patients deeply. So, but I still wanted to be in nursing. So I went more on the health administration side, the business side. Went to work in an office as a nurse researcher, was what they called me back then. Today, you would call it informatics. And I helped tell stories through clinical data at a population health company. I was there many years. And then when I left there, I went to work for a large insurer in the Medicare Advantage space. And I ran clinical quality for them and designed quality programs for seniors to improve their health and their satisfaction with our health plan. And then I moved from that to a different, very large insurer and worked for their Medicaid plan, doing very similar work, again, designing quality programs to try to reach the lower income, and more vulnerable populations that the Medicaid plans serviced. And that was a fun and challenging role in that it wasn't just about delivering care. We literally had to find the patients because they were constantly in transit, and their housing was very temporary. So lots of great challenges and learnings and experience there. And then I moved from there to on-site healthcare, or they also call it direct healthcare, which basically means we provided healthcare at the sites of large employers, so that if an employee has a sore throat or their back hurts, they can just go down the hall and see a provider. And some of the sites even had pharmacies, and it was a really cool model.
Yeah.
We had a clinic and a pharmacy ourselves, and it was really a great benefit to have. I was there 11 years, and while I was there, actually when I started working there, they put me in IT immediately. And I was like, this is interesting.
Mhm.
I'd never been in IT. I had certainly worked with technology, loved technology, but had not ever had a role in technology. So they started me out with less technologically sophisticated things. They put me over training for technology. And so I had the trainers that would go out and teach people how to use the EMR. And I had the governance aspect. So I ran a committee where we reviewed changes that people wanted to make within our clinical applications. And then over time, they gave me a team of analysts that did configuration and support for some of our applications. And I just, little by little, I sort of grew what I was responsible for. And I really enjoyed it. I loved it. And it made me want to learn more and be more of an expert. And so I went back and got a second master's degree, this time in technology leadership.
Nice.
And so those courses were all about how to lead people through times of rapid innovation and technological change, which is perfect in the world we're living in right now.
Yeah.
And that was right at the very beginning of, I mean, the all the hype that began with AI.
Yeah.
And so it was almost perfectly timed for me to leave that with my degree and then be in this world where I'm trying to help people be comfortable with AI but be responsible with how they use it. So that worked really well. And then after that, while I was still working in that same role with the on-site healthcare business, I joined a think tank that's based in DC, whose focus is on making sure humans stay first in technology and in innovation. And that's really my true calling in life is since I was a little girl, I just wanted to make the world better. I think I said that last time. And so this think tank really resonated with me. And I've spent the last 12 months with them. I just agreed or was invited to do a second year with them. So I'm excited about that. And that exposed me to my employer that I work with now and at AffirmedRX. And because of my interesting history and the technology focus and my expertise around ethical I was a very natural fit for AffirmedRX because they are a transparent company. They are a public benefit corporation. So we're legally obligated to put patients ahead of profits. And that perfectly aligns with my personal mission. And so that's where I've been the last 90 days. And it's been great. It's been awesome. I could have never planned it. When I was little, I didn't know what I'd want to be. I just knew I wanted to help people and I wanted to work hard. I always loved working. And this, long and windy road has led me to exactly where I needed to be. It's been
That's
great.
fantastic. That is,
Yeah.
you're right. It's a very kind of unorthodox, path to see. I think we've had probably 150, at least 100, maybe 150 kind of IT leaders on the podcast, whether it's CIO, CISO, founder, but mostly CIOs and CISOs. And uh, there have been very few that have had that have had kind of the same path. You
Yeah.
get the truck driver to IT, but
Yes.
nurse to nurse to IT, that's a new one. We
Yeah,
haven't had that
good.
one yet, so congratulations.
Good.
Yep, that's very cool.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I can't help but think and wonder, and I think it's very relevant and topical for today,
Mhm.
that with the advent of AI and given what you kind of got your master's in and what kind of
Mhm.
brought you to this kind of level in IT,
Mhm.
I'm really curious to see or to hear what your perspective is on now, like now that we're seeing with Iran, since the conflict, we've seen an uptick of about 250% in attacks on U.S. infrastructure, businesses, especially healthcare and finance and critical infrastructure. And I think that AI is such an important part of that defense when done right. I know that
Mm-hmm.
everybody is kind of, slapping AI into everything, and I don't think that's the right solution. Personally, I think
Yeah.
it's in solutions that are using right now machine learning, a type of AI, not the LLM that everybody thinks of. I think right
Mhm.
now using the right kind of AI in the right way is the right solution. And so you take a look at products like Darktrace, where they're using
Mhm.
machine learning to do things with identity, which would have stopped the Striker attack, which I think is really interesting because
Mhm.
that's a great example of how social engineering and traditional tools don't quite get us there, but AI would have got us there. And then you
Yeah.
see things like the McKinsey, I think it was last week, they used a red team to use AI and it took them about 2 hours to
Mhm.
infiltrate and extract data, like large amounts of data, which
Mhm.
they weren't getting with their traditional pen testing and traditional red teaming. So I think
Mhm.
these are great examples of AI, how it can be used, to kind of be the knife or the gun in a knife fight, right? Like we already
Yes.
know the bad guys are starting to, pick up, maybe it's a 22 caliber. It's not the greatest gun, but
Yes.
it's still a gun.
But
And a
it's
lot of people are still
powerful.
walking around
Mhm.
with little knives and swords, being like, we're
Yes.
protected. You are. But
Yeah.
reminds me of kind of the Indiana Jones with the whip and the gun. You don't want to be he had a sword, the guy had the swords, right? You don't want to be the
Yeah.
guy with the swords who's really good with swords and then gets shot, right? Like,
Right. Yes.
cool.
Yes. Good
So
analogy.
taking it to put to a question for you, where do you see it, and where should business leaders be focused now that the landscape is, kind of, it's really advancing quickly, and it's not just AI is cool and it can help you with your email. So where should
Yeah.
people be thinking about how to implement AI, and
Yeah.
where should the focus be these days?
What a big question. My
Yeah.
mind is in a lot of different places. We had an operations on-site meeting this week. So a lot of our operational leaders and just leaders across the board at our company were in town in Franklin, Tennessee, meeting in person. And part of what I presented was my plans for AI for the year and our general philosophy that we will have and do have, but I'm starting to communicate it now to the company. The way I'm thinking about it is we will define based on a person's role how they can use AI, how they should use AI, and what tools they will have access to use to do so.
Nice.
So, and it will be different depending on what you do. So, our patient care advocates who call patients and help them, they intervene if they're having a prior auth issue or if a medication's too expensive. They will have one tool that they will be allowed to use in a certain way, and that'll be it. And, our sales team writing RFPs, they'll have a different tool, and that will be what they do.
Yep.
And, our IT team, certain members of our IT team will have much more sophisticated tools and much more sophisticated permissions. Um, so it really is going to be role based. And we are also going to do a lot of fact checking. I'm considering actually hiring AI fact checkers
Nice.
because so much of what we see, I guess what 80% accurate maybe. And it's just what we're doing is too important.
Yep.
And so we will never produce something from AI without a human signing off on it, never at
Yep.
AffirmedRX. And so that's a big part of our philosophy. There's some fear. I heard someone told me yesterday there's some fear among some of our team members that AI will replace them. And that's not something we will be doing at AffirmedRx. We're committed to that. We're humans first. AI, we will be one of the companies that uses it as an enhancement, an augmenter, not a replacement. Um, but yeah, that's really how I'm thinking about it. It's just role-based usage. Tool will be dependent on role, permissions will be dependent on role, and we'll be auditing it heavily.
Nice.
So the other piece of it is whatever you do in your role with AI, you're responsible for it. And if it ends up being wrong and you didn't fact check it, if we don't have a fact checker for every single thing, which we wouldn't be able to. So some people will have to do that themselves, and they are the person responsible for it at the end of the day. So
I
that's my
think that's
general
brilliant.
philosophy.
I think
Yeah,
that's fantastic. And it really is because it's no matter how good the tool is, if it's a hammer that doesn't work on a screw, it just doesn't. It's a
exactly.
great hammer, the world's best hammer. Cool. It's
Exactly.
still a screw that you're hammering there and it's not going to work. So
Yeah.
I think the role-based applying the right tool to the right job is really important. Um
Yeah.
yeah, that is really, really fantastic. And it's really interesting now because everything is changing, kind of so much, so
Hmm.
fast that I think it's
Hmm.
it's really challenging just keeping up with it. And I, I
It
think
is.
I think that's part of what's really interesting about kind of how you got into IT, with your
Hmm.
master's in exactly that. And
Hmm.
how do you do that? So I would like to use that as a way to pivot into
Okay.
kind of IT leadership because you mentioned that everybody was there, and
Hmm.
I'm kind of curious, like, so when it comes to women in IT and women
Hmm.
in especially IT leadership, I think
Hmm.
I don't know statistically where we're at. I know that, the new ones coming in, it's the numbers are coming up. We're getting closer,
Hmm.
for new people coming into IT. But when it comes to leadership, I think our numbers are still really low, as
Hmm.
to the ratio of men to women, women to men. I don't think it's quite 1 to 1 yet. It's not quite 50%. Um, what's it been like on from your perspective? How because it's just a different world. There's so much to discuss and dissect here. So let me ask you, we'll
Yes.
start with the stats. What's it been like for you in your experience?
That's such a good question. And I'm curious too. I think at one point I looked it up. I looked up what percentage are women that are CIOs, and I forgot what it was. It was not 50%, that's for
Yeah.
sure. Um, so it's funny. I'm working from home today, and my parents were here this morning, and they were doing stuff in the room next to me, and I was on a meeting with my team. And after the meeting, my mom said, "Is every person on your team a man?" And I was a little bit embarrassed. And I said, "Well, every person that was on that meeting was a man, yes. And I only have one other woman on my team." Now, let me say, I didn't, I did not choose who's on the team. I've been there 90 days. Not that I would have not chosen anyone on my team. I have an
Right.
amazing team,
Of course.
but it's something that going forward, I would love to see us grow the number of women that we have on my own team, not just for the sake of it, but women have a whole different perspective to bring. And I thought this was so funny too. At the meeting in Franklin earlier this week, a woman who works in another part of the organization came up to me. I had done an IT lunch and learn last week for the whole company about my roadmap for the year. And she came up to me at this meeting and she said, "You're so unusual for a CIO." And I said, "Why?" And she said, "You're very warm and fuzzy. It's just so strange for a CIO to seem so compassionate." And I think that's part of why Greg hired me, because we are a company about compassion. And that is often not what you think of when you think of IT or IT people. It's just not. And now that we are moving into this space where AI is taking over more and more, and people are literally talking about and debating, you know, 20, 50 years from now, will robots have taken over everything? I have a friend who literally thinks that that's what's going to happen.
Uh-huh.
Um, it's more important than ever that we have IT leaders that are thoughtful, compassionate, and human first.
Yeah.
And not that men can't be that, but I think typically, especially men that go into IT, tend to be more introverted, more likely to enjoy sitting and coding and putting on their headphones and, playing video games, and maybe not being as much of an extrovert or a person that's going to be out joining a think tank to write papers for fun and doing that at night and on the weekend. You know, it's just different. Women just bring something different to the table that's important. And so I hope to increase my own numbers of women in IT, and I hope to see it elsewhere too. It's we've got work to do there for sure.
Well, I think it'll be interesting because like as you say, everybody on your team is great, and that's fantastic, and
They're
that's
wonderful.
they're all
Yeah.
wonderful, amazing, right?
Yeah.
Not that
Yeah.
you wouldn't have hired them all, and
Exactly.
and it'll be really interesting to see because everybody has a bias, whether in whether they want to admit it or not. Sometimes it's these implicit biases for
Hmm.
whatever reason, and part of that, I think, what kind of where this all originates from is your culture, right? Where you grew up. And it starts
That's
so early.
true.
You look at like the baby clothes, and the boys have like, future superhero, and the girls have
Yes.
like not dating till, daddy says I can't date till I'm 30. Like, how is that cute? And then what message are we inundating them with for that? And that's fine. That will help form their intrinsic biases. So
Hmm.
as they grow and they think like, oh, I'm just a princess,
Hmm.
okay, what can it be, Xena, Princess Warrior, right? Instead of just,
Yeah.
some fairy tale princess who has to be saved by the prince, right? And so
Yeah.
in any event, I think it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Like for you, you've got a new team as things open up, right?
Hmm.
You want the best person for the job, right?
Yeah.
And so obviously you will hire the best person for the job.
Yes.
It'll be interesting to see how the statistics play out because on the one hand, you've got to focus on balancing the team, and I think this
Hmm.
is where having, like you in particular, having a woman who's in charge of it will, instead of looking at like, oh, I'm filling this role, who would be best in this role would be this person because they're really experienced in this very particular thing, instead of
Hmm.
looking at the whole team and saying, how will
Hmm.
this person fit into the team? Which I
Yes.
think is more of a holistic, more of a, of the way a woman might think of it
Hmm.
versus typically how a guy might think of it, and like, oh, just very much this is the position. This is not that a guy can't or wouldn't, of course,
Exactly.
but it's just that kind
Exactly.
of tendency towards. So it'll be
Hmm.
really interesting to see, kind of how that plays out. And I guess my question to you is that kind of how you see it playing out, more of a holistic approach, and that will shape it. And you hope that over the course of time, it will just kind of naturally fall where it falls, and hopefully that's somewhere closer to that, 1-to-1 ratio.
Hmm. That's a great question. And DEI is a passion of mine for this, for a lot of reasons, but particularly around women in general. And we just had this discussion a couple of weeks ago at work where we were talking about the fact that we will always hire the right person. We're not going to hire someone just to check a box. But I do think part of the issue is the candidates are probably more a greater percentage male versus female for IT roles, and I
Yeah.
think it's changing, it's getting better, but it makes it harder for the right person to be a woman necessarily if 80% of the applicants are male. Um, to your question about culture, culture is probably number one for us in the company, ahead of skill set, ahead of anything else.
Yeah.
Our CEO and our entire senior leadership team, we will not tolerate people that don't maintain our culture. We just won't, because it's an amazing culture and we don't want it tarnished. And so the first thing anyone that goes through in an application process with us is a culture check. And one of our HR team members does like a 30-minute call. And if they don't pass the culture check, they don't move on. They don't go any further, regardless of what the resume looks like. And we will continue to operate that way because how one person that doesn't fit the culture or that's toxic, it genuinely can upset the culture of an entire organization, literally.
Yeah.
And we have too much to do, and it's too important to do it to waste time with that. So,
I can't help but wonder, is that something where AI actually comes in and helps? And what I mean by that is allowing you to hire people based on more on cultural fit and knowing that the skills, the job will get done because every person is kind of a super person because they're
Hmm.
all AI powered. So
Hmm.
now you've got this force multiplier in AI. So it really doesn't matter if they're the world's greatest, whatever it is,
Yeah.
because now with the help of AI, I think that the difference becomes much smaller. Everybody is so much better. So the
Yes.
delta between the world's greatest who and the average person who's using AI, the average person using AI is probably better than the world's greatest. And soon, whether it's an average person using AI or the world's greatest AI user using AI, the delta probably won't be that great
Mhm.
there either at some
Mhm.
point in the future, if that's not where we already are. I don't know, but I
Mhm.
think that that allows you to then hire people and focus more on culture, which personally I think is the most important part of any team. Like you look at anything, if you want to use sports analogies, we all know that it comes down to the players on the team, not the one superstar. So it doesn't
Yeah.
matter. It doesn't make sense to hire a bunch of Michael Jordans, even if you could, even if you could get them, because
Yeah.
that's not what creates a great team. It
Hmm.
takes the other players supporting those and them working together, in harmony. And you don't get
Hmm.
that just by hiring the best person for that with those skills for that
Hmm.
job.
Yeah, it's so true. And part of my training or my AI approach is going to be training all of our team members, which we call stewards, training all of our stewards to be responsible and empowered users of AI. And to your question, so I had an interesting thought when you were talking about everyone kind of becoming a super person with AI. I have a niece and nephew who I love dearly. They're teenagers. And we got into a philosophical discussion a few days ago, my family, about whether using AI for homework is cheating. And for me, there it's really not. It's not cheating because they need to know how to use AI
Yeah,
to just be successful in the future. Now, to have AI just write a paper for you and then turn it in, cheating, you know,
yeah,
but to use it to get a draft going for you or to pull facts together for you or to look up an answer that, and then learn how did it back into that answer. I don't think that's cheating. I think it's using the tools that they're going to need to know how to use in the future. And so I think, because of AI, we're having to rethink everything. What's acceptable and what's not acceptable and what our cultural norms are. And my mom said, "Oh, I think people are forgetting how to study." And I said, "I'm not sure people need to know how to study." You know, some roles you don't need to. Now, I love to study. I'm an input person. I'm reading all day, all night. There are some of us that are just wired that way. I don't know that everyone needs to be forced to study. Depends on what what they're going to be doing.
for sure.
Right?
Yep.
Like it's just so different. It's so different. And to our earlier point, it's such a rapidly changing time. It's just our norms, our values, our what we consider acceptable changes like every week or needs to, I think.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good point, and it brings up other issues. Like we've seen what happened with cell phones, for instance, right? The cell phone has made everybody dumber, right? And like we've got
Yes.
atrophy of the brain because
Yes.
immediately have access to information. Plus, not to mention the effect that social media has on the brain. It's not
Yeah.
been it's not been it's not been
Not
positive.
positive.
It's not
No,
positive,
it's not
right?
positive.
And
Yeah.
so I can't help but wonder if we're now going to amplify that, or if it's going to be much worse with AI, in the
Yeah.
fact that now you don't have to be creative, you don't have to do the bulk of the work, which fine, so be it. But is the if the goal of education is to teach you how to think, right? It's
Hmm.
not about learning the different maths, right? It's
Right.
about learning that to problem solve, learning to think.
Hmm. Yeah.
At some point, if AI can do all of that better than people,
Yeah.
do we then go like kind of roll humans back? Will we find a level that is much less? Because, well, you don't have to. I mean, first of all, you don't have to be good at math because now you have a calculator everywhere, right? So you could
Yeah,
just calculate. So
yeah,
when you don't have to be good at something, I mean, what's the next step, right? Does
yeah.
does that mean like we just humans will ultimately only be used for creating, you know, arts, works of art because
Mm-hmm.
we value and appreciate human created art much
Mm-hmm.
more than we will AI created art, right? So
Right.
that's kind of a no-brainer. I don't want to see 85-year-old Tom Cruise. I want to see 85-year-old Tom Cruise hanging from a plane. I don't want to see AI Tom Cruise hanging from a
Right.
plane because so
Yes.
what? Right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
people want to see human Shakespeare and they'll want to see
Yeah.
humans singing because those are impressive feats. It's not impressive because AI does it like that. So it has
Yeah.
little to no value. Same with,
Yeah.
creating, I don't know, watches or
Mm-hmm.
pottery or anything else, works of
Yeah.
art, Okay.
Yeah.
So where does that put us though? Not to go all futurist, but I mean, where does that put us with, going back to your question with homework, if nobody ever really has to learn
Mm-hmm.
because AI is doing it, where's the balance, to say, no, you really do want to learn, calculus because it helps you think in this way, not because you'll ever actually use calculus. And then how do you convince somebody who's addicted to Instagram and uses AI to do all the work that, oh yeah, I want to put in the hard work to think that through and write all that out. How do you do that?
Yeah, and that's the scary part. And I'm so sorry if you hear my dog barking.
Mm-mm,
There's a package truck outside, so she's very unhappy.
didn't hear a thing.
Okay, good. I You just went to a place that is one of my other passions, which is the damaging effects of AI and it being used in ways that are not healthy for people. And that is one of my passion projects within my think tank is doing quite a lot of research on the effects that that has on your brain, the effects that it has on your social skills, on your relationships, even on, whether you live or die.
Yeah.
And you brought up a great point too about art and music. There was a celebrity recently, I'm sure you saw, that made a comment about how something to the effect of no one cares about opera or ballet anymore, and he's a younger guy, and
Yep.
the internet erupted in a division of people that either agreed with him or thought that was the worst thing to say. I'm one of the latter. I love art, I love music, I love culture, and it is good for our brains. There are studies showing that looking at art and creating art and listening to music and playing music are so good for our brains. And the thought of moving to a place where we may not have as much of that and people may not be creating as much of that themselves is really scary to me. And I can't help but think if we stop studying, if we stop learning information ourselves, if we stop dancing, stop going to art museums, what does happen to our brains? Maybe then the robots do take over, because we're just all zombies at that
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
It's a little bit scary to think about, and I think I hope everyone will continue to make time to be outside, get fresh air, get sunshine, go to the museum, paint, draw, try new things. It's all so important. AI is so fun, and I get it hooked on it too. At night, I'm like, churning stuff out, and you just get almost addicted to the high of it. But then it's super important the next day that you get out and do all the other things that life is about, or I think we're all going to get really sick. Like,
Y-
this
it's interesting. The Romans had, and I forget the name of it, but they had a term for kind of working on philosophy and learning and like it's how you spend your unstructured time. They had a name
mm,
for this, and the reason being back in the you rewind a couple thousand years ago and they had reached a level of prosperity thanks to slavery that most Romans didn't have to work like we do now, and so they
mhm,
were able to live and they had all this unstructured time. So the question was,
Hmm.
how do you use your unstructured time? And it was seen as the
Interesting.
highest form was to use it in the arts and learning. And so you were kind of building and you were becoming more educated and you were focusing on improving yourself as a educated, learned person. You could also spend it in commerce and business and doing those things and enriching yourself financially. Um, but I think that it's going to be something like that where it's not going to be cool. Like right now, you follow cool in any fashion, and whatever everybody is doing is not cool. But by definition, it's not cool because if everybody does it, that's not cool, right? So the cool kids are always coming up with something new. And we've kind of seen this in like the what's cool with like the quiet luxury, the people who have the money, who grew up, the old money people, like their definition of cool, as soon as people can, and we've been, the country's been getting richer and richer, and so as soon as they find out about these spots and they start going to these spots, that's no longer cool, and so they find new ways of
Yes.
showing. And when they can't outspend the nouveau riche, it's about the cultural things and kind of growing up in that. So yeah, you came, and that we've seen even as you rewind hundreds of years ago. That was,
Hmm.
the Astors. That was a thing that they struggled with getting into polite society in New York, a couple hundred years ago, or 150 years ago, when they were trying to, they had all this new money, but they weren't cultured. They didn't come from it. And so
Yeah.
I wonder if that's going to be the thing in the future where everybody's kind of plugged into their AI headset or whatever. Maybe it's just like plugged into a virtual world and AI is
Yeah.
doing everything and they're just kind of. Did you ever see Wally? That it's the old kids
Oh,
movie,
a long
right?
time ago, right? Like
A long
from
time
the
ago. And
80s.
they're like
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
humans are up in space and they're all just like on their floating recliners, fat as hell, just being fed by a tube, and the robots are doing everything for them. So I wonder if there's going to be people like that because
Yeah.
you don't have to get up. Food is great. It just push a button, it comes to you. It doesn't cost you anything. And
Yeah.
people just get fat and lazy. And that
Hmm.
will certainly be uncool. And the cool people will be the ones who really focus on their health and their body and
Yeah.
learning and stuff. I don't know.
That's interesting. It's interesting. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see because I think even in our lifetime, it it will change, and so it'll be interesting to see 20 years from now, 30 years from now. Because it is accelerating so rapidly that we're going to get to see how it affects society in some pretty drastic ways, I think.
Yeah. Well, I think the topic I really wanted to talk to you about today was women in leadership and,
Yes.
and IT. And
Yeah.
I think I'm curious if you think that is this a are there so many cultural biases where we see like a lot of guys who'd be like, look, not all guys are bad. No, of course not.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we don't have a culture where when a guy says something, sexist, a guy in power or the cool guy, whether it's social power, political power, economic power, find whatever it is, the
Mm-hmm.
person, the guy in power says something sexist, racist, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Racist, we're starting to get there, but
Yeah.
it still gets passed by depending
Yeah.
on the climate. But I think that's the one that helps people realize, wait a sec, why do I see this sexist joke as less funny when they're, or like when guy talks, it makes some offhanded joke about his wife that's like, it's that old trope and it's like the old ball and chain stuff. At
Mm-hmm.
what point, do we get to where the guys who aren't in power stand up and be like, yeah, that's not cool, like they would if they told, use the N word, or
Yeah.
said some off-colored racist joke, which is really easy to be a
Yeah.
black and white thing, but less so. Why is it less so
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to a sexist comment or joke? And why do we not have a culture where it's like, oh, dude, no, that's messed up, like not cool, bro?
Yeah.
Why is that not there yet?
Yeah, you've opened a Pandora's box here with this one.
I was hoping to.
So I keep referring to the research I'm doing in my free time for fun, and specifically, the area that I'm looking into the most is how AI and technology related to AI are actually, in a lot of ways, perpetuating the dynamic you just described.
Really?
And it's because it's easier now to do it than ever.
Hmm.
Because, before you could only do it in person or on a street, passing someone on a street or in a meeting, making a comment. Now you can do it anonymously online in any forum. And so I think it's created this almost safe space where men can do it, men that want to do it, and get away with it a lot more easily. And then we have variables as well, like I read this horrifying book that talked about some physical AI and physical aspects of AI being utilized in really nasty ways. Like there are these brothels in Europe, and maybe there's some in the US too, where they have these lifelike dolls of women, and then they have AI as well, so that they interact with you like a human would, and men can rent them and rent time with them to have sex with them. And the dolls have been beaten up. A woman went undercover and went in dressed as a man to see what it was like. And like the woman, one of her ears had been ripped off and just had been completely brutalized. And the author of the book said, well, so what they're trying to say is we're giving men this outlet where they can go let their aggression out on these dolls rather than doing it on real women. And so it's going to help. But she made such a good point. She said, are we going to create a place where teenagers can go and shoot dolls and pretend it's a school shooting? I mean, this is really dark, and I'm sorry for going so dark,
No,
but
it's
it
great.
shouldn't, it is that level of unacceptable, and yet it's okay. People are doing it,
That, I
you
mean,
know?
that doesn't address the underlying issue.
No.
Just saying like, oh, you know what? Um, you know, so and so gets drunk every night and then comes home and is abusive to everybody they're around. And so we need to have an outlet for that. Well, why don't you focus on the alcoholism
Yes.
that's feeling? If so and so
Yeah.
wasn't drinking, then so and
Yeah.
so wouldn't come back, and then you could address the underlying issues of why are they so angry? Like
Hmm. Yeah.
what is wrong in their life that they're using?
Yes.
That's crazy.
What's
Because that's a
driving it?
BS argument of, yeah, they need an outlet.
Oh,
Oh,
it's
what?
so stupid.
Because men are
It's
just naturally,
Yeah.
are horrendous animals that need to, abuse women, and like, come, get out of here.
Right. Well,
That's
I'll
not the
tell
norm.
you, no, it's horrific.
It's
And I'll tell you, well, and similar things are happening in the metaverse and, you know,
right.
really anywhere online, women are being assaulted, raped, harmed, called horrible names. And any women that dare to stand up and talk about it then become a target themselves. And
Now,
so a
are
lot
we
of women are
saying
afraid to talk about it.
Are we saying like virtually, like in the metaverse? So like these. Yeah.
Yeah,
So I'm
yeah.
curious, is this, yes, obviously the underlying issue, there's something, effed up going on there with people
Hmm.
who feel that way. And does the anonymity allow people to do things that they wouldn't do, or even consider doing if their name was attached to it, and suddenly like, oh, well, your employer now knows that you said and did all
Yes.
that. So like, and it goes back to that old, what was it? Was it Dale Carnegie, or no? that- Whoever came up with the quote, and it's been done many times with I don't do anything, I wouldn't do anything that I wouldn't be, proud to have published on the front
Hmm.
page of the New York Times or whatever, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Great. So if
Yeah.
everything you're doing in your life is you're doing with that in mind,
Yeah.
um, then great. Uh,
Yeah.
So on the one hand, I'm kind of all for getting rid of that anonymity
Hmm.
on the internet that allows
Hmm.
people that sort of outlet. On the other hand, I'm also concerned, of kind of an overbearing, kind of nation state that knows all, sees all. And now we're, you know,
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
I don't know what the balance is there, but I
Hmm.
haven't seen any real benefit to people
Hmm.
being allowed to just be anonymous anywhere. Like,
Yeah.
what's the benefit there? Like,
Yeah.
what? So
I,
you,
yeah. I totally agree. Why would you want to be anonymous if it's okay what you're doing?
yeah,
I we, I guess every city has this like a hip Nashville or hip online community where if you live there, people go on and post about restaurants or parades or whatever events are going on. And I would not even go on to post, I would literally not post anything on this page. I would not even post like, hey, I went to this restaurant and it was great, because people will respond hatefully to it and anonymously. You can't say anything
wow.
without somebody, more than one, responding with a hateful message. And I do want to go to I don't want to stop your thought that you just had, but I wanted to
No,
say, you were asking about what drives this and like what
yeah,
can we do about it. As a psychologist, well, I was trained in psychology. Um, I really believe, and you tell me what you think, because as a man, you tell me what you think. I think there are some men that are having trouble adjusting to the acceleration of how women's role has changed. And I think some men have grown up and always seen and thought of the man's the provider. He's the one, kind of up on a pedestal. The woman has this role over here and a little bit of a corner. And now women are, getting these great jobs and doing all the things men do and, making lots of money and being really successful and not having children as much and not wanting to stay home with kids as much. And I think I think some men may need some sort of social emotional support to adjust with, well, what does that mean for you now? What's your identity now? And help them work through it. And not that they'd be willing to go through it, but I almost feel like that's what's needed is some sort of acknowledgement that we know your world has changed a lot. And how do we navigate you figuring out who you are in this new world? I don't know. That may be completely kooky, but that's sort of where my head
I
goes.
don't think it's kooky. I think that, okay, so I have a very particular vantage point in, I have one perspective. I grew up, it's funny because I grew up very, very poor in Pennsylvania, and
Mhm.
I joined the army to escape, that life. And
Yeah.
I used that to, as a springboard to go to college and better myself and start my business. And now I do quite well. And
Mhm.
so I but the difference is, like, I have siblings who think differently than me, and the people I grew up with
Yeah.
think differently than me. Um,
Yeah.
it comes down to your thinking. And sure, I am a 6'3", white guy, so I have a
Hmm.
very particular, the world treats me a certain way, I treat the
Hmm.
world a certain way, and I get that. That is, my unique position. Now, at the same time, if I were a bumbling idiot, if I were a disrespectful asshole, if,
Hmm.
the way that you interact with people matters. So I think part of the problem is that we have a culture that tells guys one thing. We teach we from the very earliest days, we're telling boys one thing, girls another thing.
Yeah.
And that we need to stop. Like, at
Yeah.
the earliest
Yeah.
stages, girls
I
aren't
agree.
weaker. That's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Physically, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Like, there are physical
There are
differences.
differences.
Who gives
Yeah.
a who gives a
Yeah.
crap? It's
Yeah.
no longer caveman days. We no longer need that. That's not even a thing.
Mm-mm.
So that has nothing to do with anything.
Yeah.
So, but treating, somebody as though they're inferior or lesser,
Hmm. Hmm.
that's the real problem. And we're doing it to our babies, like, from,
You're
infants,
right.
on
You're
the
right.
clothing they're wearing. We're
Yeah.
imprinting that. And I think the problem stems from the earliest days. And
Hmm.
then as they grow up, that bifurcates, them into girls and boys. And
Yep.
girls are strong, and girls are pretty and weak, and all these other tons of things that go along with it. And
Hmm.
then you put on top of that the fact that for guys, now this is a whole nother subculture, right? Like
Mhm.
the US male subculture, and that's a very general one because that's like let's just cover
Very
all of them, right?
diverse.
Like
Yeah,
very,
yeah,
very, it's more diverse. But in
yeah.
general, we're now talking about guys are raised like, boys don't cry.
Right.
You suck it up, and
Yeah.
there's fewer like, oh, there's just less compassion, and
Yes.
for boys and their problems, and then that becomes for men and their problems. There's less
Yes.
compassion, less understanding. So
Yes.
you take into account, if you rewind to the earliest days, and then you take into account not everybody gets the same advantages. So now on top of boys don't cry, suck it
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
You pile on top of that all the other things. So like if you're a short kid, if you're a fat kid, if you're a
Mm.
mental, if you have learning challenges, all these
Mhm.
things, like to be successful in the world, in the United States, you're supposed to be all these things. You're supposed to
Yeah.
be tall, good looking,
Right.
intelligent, well educated, and be Superman, not have problems, not do this, be able to save
Mhm.
everybody, be able to stand up for the weak people. Well,
Mhm.
not everybody is. And
Yeah.
so then you have all of these pressures and things that they're
Pressures. Yeah.
supposed to be that they can't possibly live up to. And
Yeah.
now I think it kind of compounds from there. How do we fix
Mhm.
that? I don't know. I've just always noticed that there are a lot of guys who end up crumpling under the pressure,
Mhm.
because, and I'll take an example, like there are, I think when you're not tall, like the
Mhm.
shorter guys have a much harder time. We know that
Yeah.
statistically. They don't
Yeah.
earn as much. They have a harder
Yeah.
time getting romantic partners,
Mhm.
and that's all jacked up. Like there's no
Yeah.
reason for that other than it's a cultural BS
Yeah. It's
stereotype and
cultural.
things that we've
Yeah.
been programming girls and boys about from birth that nobody
Mhm.
has any control over because it was
Mhm.
genetically gifted. That's like saying blacks should make more than whites, like, or
Mhm.
vice versa. It's like, what are you talking
Yeah.
about? You didn't have any
Yeah.
control over it, so why should you benefit from it more than
Yeah.
somebody? So they're now facing um these biases, this hatred, these forces, and now on top of that, they're not paid as much. They're not doing this,
Mhm.
and so I don't think that's coming from the tall, good-looking, successful guys who are like,
Yeah.
what's the problem? Because there
Yeah.
isn't a problem. Life's pretty
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
When you're all those things, you've got
Mhm.
money, you've got access to everything, and the world treats you nicely. But when you're not, when
Yeah.
you're the opposite of that,
Yeah.
the world doesn't treat you as nicely. And
Mhm.
so that is not an excuse. I think those are the forces at play.
Yeah.
I don't understand because you do see sometimes you see people who are exceptional when they're short, they're not good looking, they're not
Mhm.
overcompensating, they're just solid human beings who just like they are approaching the world, and I don't know if they had just great parents that hugged them
Mhm.
enough and gave them that or what it
Yeah.
was, but sometimes
Yeah.
you see those exceptional people who kind of defy the odds. But how do we
Mhm.
make that the norm to where everybody growing up he ends up being like that, who they become very, strong, confident, capable
Yeah.
people, because I don't think they're the ones out there mutilating the AI robots and
Yeah.
anonymously saying, mean, hurtful things, because there's not that.
Right.
So it doesn't make any of it right. That's my crazy theory
Yeah.
on it. But from
Yeah.
my perspective, and I only have one, I think that is part of the picture. And I
Yeah.
don't know how we fix it other than we gotta start at the earliest ages as a
Totally agree.
as a culture. We have to say those shirts are not cool.
Yeah.
That we're sticking our babies in. Oh, that's cute.
Mhm.
It's not cute. It's
Yeah.
it's ridiculous. Look at how you're raising your daughter.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
that's your that and what you're telling your son when you put your daughter in that, and what you're telling the rest of the world when you do that. And it seems so innocent, but I think
Yeah.
it's malevolent.
It's
I think it's really
insidious.
bad.
It is.
Insidious, yeah.
It is. And even the assignment of colors, and then you kind of grow up, well, pink is a feminine color and blue is a masculine color. Well, is it? Are they decided that,
Yeah.
It's
It's weird.
it's weird rules that you're right, people just made up along the way, and now they're all firmly cemented. And bringing it all back to AI,
Yes.
all the gender stuff that we just talked about, you know, when the internet's being scraped and pulled into AI models, so much of it's being reinforced, and that's so scary too.
Yeah.
It's getting better, and we're finding ways to avoid some of the deep biases that are there, but the work is cut out for us for sure because of the history, and even today, like we're talking about, like it's still pretty rampant. So
Yeah.
it's complex.
It is. And hopefully it's one of these things where I think that we're seeing people become very quickly comfortable with AI and the output.
Yeah.
And I think obviously it's too early to comfortably do that. But if you look at how a self-driving car works,
Mhm.
just by being in it and going hundreds of miles and it being perfect, you're like, well, this is freaking awesome. And
Yeah.
then when it does make a mistake, it's bad. And
Yeah.
so it's not there yet, right?
Yeah.
And AI
Yeah.
is not there yet. But I think because we're already seeing people willing to give AI the controls on the decisions of, should I do this? Should I do that? And get that response. I'm hopeful that AI will be like, will solve all of these problems and be like, that's ridiculous. That shirt's got to go. These are things that are creating, problems within, this, it's creating misogyny, it's creating
Yeah.
anger, it's
Yeah.
creating, so I'm gonna hold out hope on a bright side that I think that I think this makes perfect sense, that AI will fix that. And not like, yeah,
I
AI will
love
fix everything,
that.
but I think it
Yeah.
could, because it's gonna look at it and be like, look, I've seen the data and I see how this is pieced together, and
Yeah.
this is ridiculous. It all comes from this and this and this, and I can piece those together and be like, this is where this is where we fix it. We need to stop with it. Not
Yeah.
speaking for AI, but we fix these little things, the shirts, the this, the that,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
boom. And suddenly, before you know it, the next generation grows up totally different,
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe 2 generations from now, it'll be a level playing field.
right?
Wouldn't that be amazing? Yeah. And
Yeah.
it could be true. It could be true.
I
It,
totally believe so.
I like it. If AI is as smart as we think it is,
Then it's going to solve that
it will
because,
solve it.
yep,
Yep.
100%. And
Well,
people will
thank
believe
you.
it. You're welcome.
That's a perspective I did not have, and
How about that?
I will take this forward. I like it. I
Yeah,
like it a lot.
me
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
Laurel, I think we could do this all day, but
I know. It's
this has been
crazy.
so
I know.
awesome. This is great. Yet
Same.
again, another great
Same.
episode. Well, before we go, as always, can you tell everybody where they can find out more about you, more about AffirmedRX and your think tank?
Yes, yes. Please check us out. Affirmed RX. It's one word. We have a great website and my LinkedIn, Laurel Cipriani. I would love for anyone to hit me up there. As you can see, I love to talk about a variety of topics. Anyone that wants to geek out on history, culture, technology, psychology, healthcare, bring it on. I'd love to meet you. And I would love to give a shout out to the Digital Economist, my think tank that I've been with for the last 12 months. And I'm about to become a member of the World Technology Congress as well, based in Switzerland. And I'm
Nice.
so excited to be part of an international think tank and see what good we can do there. So very exciting times.
Well, as you get into that, I think we will have to have you back on just to talk about that and more. So
Yes,
that'd be great.
thank
Um,
you.
Laurel, thanks again for coming on, and until next time.
Thanks for having me. See ya.
Thanks for listening to the Cyber Business Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.